Okefenokee, at the heart of it is, it's the Okefenokee Swamp, and it has alligators and wild things. It's just a really unique refuge to be at.
You know, it surprises people that fire is such a big feature in what is a wetland landscape, but when we were taking people out on tours, we weren't talking about if a fire starts. We were saying when a fire starts.
We were at one of the most severe and long-term drought periods that we had seen in decades.
The initial fire actually did not start on the refuge. It started about 12 miles northwest of the refuge on private property. It was started by a downed power line,
which fell down into a just tender, dry power line right away. And there was somebody pretty much on the scene that saw it, got on the phone, you know, was saying, hey, we've got a fire starting up. It just absolutely exploded. Within a couple of days, you know, it was 1,200 acres and growing. I mean, just by leaps and bounds, it was growing.
Well, we were concerned probably the day after the fire started, it was going to be driven towards the refuge.
Another fire started just to the north and west of Fargo, and that, believe it or not, the railroad was fixing some rail lines, and they were just welding up their deal, and a spark hit.
And finally, they all merged together into one big fire. The high point, I think there was something like 4,000 firefighters from all across the United States working, you know, on this fire. It was huge. It was 560,000 acres, I believe was the figure.
And all these volunteer fire departments were all doing their part to stop that fire, push it back, contain it. We didn't get this fire contained until November. Okay, we were still fighting it all the way through the summertime, and it wasn't considered out until December.
We just had to wait on what we call a season-ending event, which could be anywhere from a 5 to 6 inch rainfall.
And if it wasn't for the Osceola National Forest and their prescription burning program that removed thousands of acres of forest lands just prior to the fire, removed the fuel load, and a number of communities that really had got ahead of the curve the year before and did a wildfire wise community kind of fire planning, that stopped that fire from going into Lake City. You know, we were within a hair's breadth of really coming to the point where thousands of people would have had to be evacuated. But because of the effort of different land managers to use wildfire to deal with the fuels ahead of time, and communities that were really, you know, thought ahead of this and got rid of a lot of that urban interface heavy brush, that fire stopped before it really caused that much trouble.
Okefenokee Swamp is a fire-adapted, fire-shaped, and to some extent even fire-dependent landscape.
In order for the swamp ecosystem to maintain itself as a swamp ecosystem, it has to have fire. Historically, I think if you look at the records, these big fires occur, you know, roughly about every 20 to 30 years. So fire is good for the swamp. It actually opened up areas that had been encroached by years and years of growth, you know, without fire.
Of course, it spread all of that, you know, nitrogen all over the landscape. It was really interesting when the fire had passed. You could tell that everything had received this dusting of ash. The grass all around this, it never has been greener than it was. You know, it did what we know it does. It created a nutrient release that acted like a fertilizer to the entire ecosystem.
So fire is one of these fickle things that it's different every time. It burns a different pattern. So as long as you have this landscape with a variety of patterns, you have all sorts of built-in resilience and diversity for your species. So our wildlife really came back quite well. If it wasn't for droughts and fires and floods, the Okefenokee would just evolve into basically a forested bog with a lot less diversity than we have right now. So it's integral to the health and long-term viability of the Okefenokee Swamp in the wilderness area to have fire and droughts and floods. It's what makes it, you know, so unique and beautiful.